Vegas, Sin City, America's playground. I was there in September of 2013. I'm a gambler at heart, so this was heaven for me. I played roulette at the Quad, blackjack at the Palazzo and Caesar's Palace, and at Harrah's. I also was immersed in all the Vegas spectacle. Watched the pirate show outside Treasure Island, walked through the aquarium at Mandalay Bay, saw an illusionist show at the Mirage. I went to the burlesque show at the Flamingo, where a drunken Indian stumbled about and ruined a solo dance of one of the performers and had to be escorted out. But the most spectacular thing I saw wasn't in any casino. In fact, it wasn't even in Vegas itself. It was out there in the barren desert, in the middle of nowhere, where one of the most awesome scenes that one can ever see stretches from horizon to horizon. It was the week of September 1st through 7th. That's still a rather hot time to be visiting America's desert. Indeed, the hottest day there was 114 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 45.5 degrees Celsius. But there was method to this madness. The Nevada desert is about the most sparsely populated area in the United States, barring Alaska, and throughout the summer months, for a few nights each month, you can see the panoramic, horizon-to-horizon shot of the Milky Way. In every other state of the contiguous United States, the light pollution is so bad that, on average, on a clear night, you can see only a handful of stars, maybe 50 in all. On the right night, in a very dim country area, out here, you can see as many as 7,700. The timing has to be crucial. There's only about a dozen, at most, nights a year to get a sky shot like that. It has to be the right time of year, so that the Earth is between the Sun and the rest of the galaxy. That was summer, hence why I left Canada to go to the Mojave Desert in September. It also had to be during a new moon, because you need there to be nothing else, not even a cell phone's backlight, to pollute the dark with non-stellar light. The new moon itself was on the 5th of September, Thursday, yet I opted to go on the Wednesday. I figured 1/27th of the moon's sliver wouldn't interfere, because checkout was 11 a.m. Friday and I didn't want to be wrecked beyond the point of what was necessary for the flight back to Canada Friday night. We had rented a car while in Las Vegas for this express purpose. The night lights of the city would make stargazing as impossible on the Strip as in New York City. The internet gave me answers as to the best places to go that were 2.5 to 5 hours from the city in various national parks, yet the people I talked to in Las Vegas merely said, just go 15 miles out the 93. On the Wednesday night, just my luck, it rains. Pisses rain. Storm clouds, at least what the Nevadans qualify as storm clouds, from horizon to horizon. The desert was supposed to be the safe bet. But, as we were repeatedly told, the rains were much more precipitous this year than on average. But there were high winds and patches of clear in the distance, so I just hoped that they would clear. So while I waited for the skies to clear, I went to the gun range, 4 blocks from our hotel, dropped my credit card on the counter and fired off a sniper rifle, that they simply called a Savage, and an AK-47, something you'd never get to do in Canada for so little red tape. It was actually an awesome experience, and I'm not a bad shot for point-blank range with a sniper rifle. The range, of course, played up the machismo of it, and when you first walk in, the receptionist is a 20-something blonde with a tight body and perky voice, V-neck shirt, short shorts, and a pistol in a thigh holster. Entirely decorative, I could easily tell. Anyway, by the time I got back to the hotel and we went for dinner, the rain had stopped, but there was still some overcast, and the sun had completely set, so it was hard to tell just how overcast it was. I went for a walk along the Strip to better gauge the sky, and after about a half hour or so, when I was walking back, I could tell just how sparse the cloud cover was. There was only one small cloud and nothing more, so I headed immediately back to the hotel. My friend had not been feeling well and was already asleep, so I merely grabbed the keys, the cameras, and snuck back out. After all, the whole reason for renting the car was for this, so it would have been a complete waste and I'd have been pissed if I hadn't gone for it. I stole a map from the closed Hertz desk and headed for the parking garage. It was here, earlier that day, that they told me to just go up to 93. It was 11:15. I took Coville to Spring Mountain Road to the 15/93, got on going towards Salt Lake City. Once you pass North Las Vegas, the speed limit jumps to 75 miles an hour, and I drove for what felt like forever before I saw the junction for the 93. The entire time, you're leaving the valley into the hills, and you see a sea of orange and yellow from the city, a glorious sight, but presented the looming fear that I'd have to drive for a long distance up the 93. The ramp was about the distance of a good-sized drive-through, coming to a stop sign at the bottom, and I had to stand on the brake. It was a 4-way stop, and a truck appeared at my right before I could see any directional signs. An image of the map appeared in my mind, and I went with the direction that seemed right, turning left. There were no identifying highway signs, so I had no idea if I'd made the right decision. There was also no speed limit sign, so I had no idea how fast to go. It was a rural highway, which in Ontario is usually 80 kilometers an hour, so I chose 55 and locked the cruise. Immediately there were 2 power generating stations, one after the other, to my left that were painted in lights, and the one remaining cloud over Las Vegas, or to the south of it, I couldn't be sure, was illuminated as bright as a white cloud and the day sky. Presently I see a turnoff to my right, leading to a gravel or sand pit stop on the side of the road, which I recognized only by the reflection of my headlights off the taillights of a car parked there, and I considered turning around to join him. But that white cloud still loomed immediately to my left, and I figured I didn't want to pull into the lone gravel lot next to some random stranger in the middle of the night, in the middle of the desert. So I kept going, figuring there'd be another one of those gravel or sand turnoffs eventually. Pulling off onto the shoulder was not really an option, as the slope was far too steep into the ditch, and the shoulder itself was really only a tire's breadth. I'd need to turn off all my lights in order to see this properly, which meant I'd be hugging the side of the road, inches from being smashed by a wandering truck, as few and far between as they may have been. I vowed I'd go another 10 miles looking for another gravel lot, and then see how it looked. It was empty on this highway. All the lights had vanished. So more and more stars were appearing through my windshield, but I still had my high beams on, and I didn't have a hope of seeing the clouds of endless stars clustered together. Didn't have a hope in seeing the scar shape of the galaxy until I parked the car. There was a turn in the highway, veering slightly to the right, at which point I watched a truck coming at me for about 6 or 7 minutes before I realized it was a truck's headlights. The following day we drove up the same highway to the junction of the 93 and the 375, where the extraterrestrial highway begins, and let me tell you, this has to be the straightest road I've ever seen. There's about a 40-mile stretch that's as straight as straw. You could fall asleep behind the wheel, wake up an hour later, and not have gone off the road. After that truck passed me, there was nothing more. The glowing cloud to my left over Las Vegas was slowly passing to my rear, and I kept my eyes open for another turn-off pit stop. One finally came right about 10 miles after the first, which would have been about 12 or 15 miles past the junction with the Interstate 15. I overshot it because I didn't see it until I was right on top of it, slowed down, did a 3-point turn right there in the middle of the highway, and then went back and pulled in. There's a fence that runs along the highway 30 feet or so from the road, which I later came to assume was a wildlife control fence. I swung the car around in this little sand lot, using the headlights to determine the limits of it. Then I came to a stop, parked the car, and removed the keys. It takes a second for the headlights to go out and the dome light to go off, and you have to open the door to get the dash lights and the radio to go dark, so I stepped out of the car as the headlights finally went dim. It took a few seconds for my eyes to fully adjust, but I wasn't completely blind to what lay above me. There it was, clusters and clouds, a spattering of stars from horizon to horizon. The cloud over Vegas was far in the distance by now, and I had the entire night sky illuminated above me. And I mean illuminated. The terrain around me was as black as pitch. You couldn't even see an inch outside the limits of your high beams when you're on the road, not a single highway light or other vehicle as far as the eye could see. And they could see pretty far. This was flat desert with no humidity, perfect visibility, the clear air of the Nevada Plateau, and the outline of the mountains in the distance in any direction. It was impossible to determine how far away they were. The following day I discovered they were indeed on the far horizon. The entire sky, a sight so panoramic as to astound the imagination, was streaked with the majestic spilt milk of the galaxy. Except for 3 dark lines crisscrossing the splendor. It took me a second to realize these were power lines above my head. That's how pitch it was out here. I had driven for 15 miles into the desert without ever seeing, just beyond the periphery of my high beams, that there were power lines running parallel to the road the entire time. The sky itself wasn't black. The land was, the mountains in the distance were, but the sky was surprisingly bright, a navy blue with a light tint of maroon and violet. The stars were all white, with the slightest hint of a sky blue. Even with all the majesty I was seeing, it was still only the stars of that color spectrum, the reds and the yellows not luminous enough to show up. It should be noted here that when you look at pictures on Google Images and you see the entire sky streaked in red or violet or whatnot, you're seeing an image taken with a special camera with a lens adjusted to a certain spectra of light. That's not what you see with your naked eyes. That's why none of my images turned out. I took dozens of pictures, seeing nothing on the screen, it should be noted, hoping to capture this, but every one of them came out black. I also had my sister's old mini VHS camcorder, which I tried to record with, also to get black video. A friend of mine would later tell me you need a certain camera with a special lens to capture this light. Yet, despite the differences between highly expensive cameras used for Google Images and my naked eyes, it was still, and I'm trying not to exaggerate, euphemize, or get poetic here, the single most spectacular sight I have ever seen. That wasn't on a woman's chest. I do have to put that qualifier in there. I had gone to the Flamingos Burlesque topless show the previous night, so I had an up-to-date basis for comparison. There are not words to describe it. And then, it got fucking spooky. I'm using that word quantitatively. Picture this. You can't see your hand in front of your face. The mountains in the distance could be 20 feet from you or 1,000 miles. You didn't know there were power lines to your side. You missed the turnoff. There's not a single light, not even a radio dial, from horizon to horizon. All you can see is something so dim that you haven't seen 1/1000th of it before, despite it having been there every night of your life. And no one knows where you are. You're 30 miles into the desert, with the bodies of Jimmy Hoffa and Amelia Earhart, at 12:30 in the morning in a foreign country. The thing is, I wasn't worried about other people that might be out here with ill intent. I was worried about the wildlife. I could be gored to death by a bighorn sheep and no one would ever know. I could be bitten by a rattlesnake. I could be prowled by a cougar, or a puma if you prefer, or a catamount, whichever name you like to attach to it. It does hold the Guinness World Record for the animal with the most names. As we learned at the National Atomic Testing Museum that Monday, their range does extend into the desert. And you literally would not see it until it took your eyes out. Okay, in the case of the sheep, you might hear the hooves clomping as it charged toward you, but I really wasn't too worried about the sheep. I didn't stay out there that long. My cameras clearly weren't working, and the image would be forever burned into my memory. Never has an image been more surreal, more awe-inspiring, more humbling.